Good morning. Start your day informed and ahead. Today is Thursday, the 13th of August. I'm Angela Lagunsad Castro.
And I'm Cheska Lituncala. We are bringing you the perfect mix of the headlines you need and the conversations that shape your day.
From the news desk to the digital space, we have got you covered. I'm Pauline Verzosa, and welcome to Morning Matters.
First in the news, tensions flared on day 15 of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. The exchange began during defense lawyer Christine Ferrer's cross-examination of State Auditor Soilin May Del Campo. Prosecution counsel Lorna Capunan objected to Ferrer's line of questioning, saying misleading questions are not allowed even during cross-examination. Ferrer disagreed while also insisting the witness answer some questions with a simple yes or no.
Not all questions can be answered by yes
I am
or
on
no.
cross, Your Honor, please.
Counsels.
Never mind if you're on cross. There are limits to cross-examination. Misleading questions are not allowed
They
on
are
cross.
allowed.
I don't think I need to lecture
please.
you that.
Presiding Officer Chis Escudero stepped in, warning both lawyers not to let a generational divide further heighten tensions in the courtroom. The exchange later spilled over into side comments, prompting Ferrer to ask the court to remind counsels to refrain from such remarks.
Please, counsels, let's not allow the generational or seeming generational divide increase the tension in the courtroom. Let's keep it a notch lower.
I am preventing myself from giving her a spanking, Your Honor. That is what I would
Your
have
Honor,
done
please.
Again,
in the
counsels.
generational divide, Your Honor.
Again,
Your Honor,
counsels, you are all members of the bar and
Yes,
you're
Your Honor.
all counsels
I submit,
for the parties.
submit.
And we will be treating and looking at each one equally. At Miss
I will-
Miss Eileen.
Yes, Your
And
Honor.
it's also-
I promise to henceforth behave.
Your
Thank
Honor,
you.
can I please respond quickly lang, no? I have high respect for Attorney Capunan. In fact, she's one of
You
my
can end there,
idols.
counsel.
Let's end here. Let's end here.
You can end there.
This
with
might
the
sound
high
like a,
respect.
it might sound like a eulogy, Your Honor. I'm still very much alive.
All right, so that was day 15 of your impeachment trial yesterday. But of course, as we all watched, there was a little bit of tension between the two panels. They found themselves in a heated exchange. It provided a bit of a comic relief, kumbaga, ika nga. But of course, the presentation of the evidence continued on the Article 1, which is the alleged misuse of confidential funds. So a meme was born out of that.
Attorney Ina Zamora, a new meme is born.
Oh, yun na nga.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, but of course, tinalakay doon sa impeachment trial yesterday was yung napag-usapan din natin dito na of course yung sinasabi ng COA editor na they issued the notice of disallowance because of the admission of the disbursing officer of Vice President Sara Duterte in the House Justice Committee that they transferred or they gave the confidential funds to the head of the security of Vice President Sara Duterte upon her request or instructions. So, yun nga, if you can remember when Attorney Molo when I asked Attorney Molly yesterday about it, sabi niya, it could probably open something for defense, which is yun yung pinag-usapan din nila yesterday na pwede lang tanong, ito ba ay talagang ibinigay, paano, etc. That's why it's very interesting to watch next week because they're going to get the disbursing officer na si Gina Acosta, one of the hostile witnesses nga for next week. Ano yung sasabihin niya, paano ibinigay, bakit binigay itong confidential funds na ito sa isang unauthorized person, which is a violation of the joint circular.
That was only one of several clashes. It was quite eventful yesterday between Attorney Ferrer and Attorney Capunan, but also another very interesting incident yesterday was Attorney Sheila Sison calling out the post of Attorney Ligutan regarding the misleading questions post online And I got to watch the press conference of Attorney Reggie Tongol yesterday, and someone asked him kasi kung ano yung possible extreme sanctions. So like, what's the most extreme sanctions? Because we have to wait until Monday, di ba? So parang sinabi niya na the most extreme penalty for lawyers under the rules of court is detention.
Okay.
So that's under direct or indirect contempt. The others would be the impeachment court can refer disciplinary sanctions to the Supreme Court for removal or suspension. The administrative sanctions on a lawyer for not following proceedings of the court. Meron din reprimand. Meron din admonish. That is somehow mas mabigat daw sa pag-reprimand, or they pay a fine or they revoke the appearance, especially for private prosecutors kasi daw it's a delegated authority that needs approval of the court.
But I'm really curious to know if this violated the sub judice rule, because the prosecution maintained, yesterday, Attorney Benjamin Tolosa said it did not, because technically Attorney Ligutan wasn't talking or delving into the merits of the case. He was reacting to something that was already discussed and tackled in court, diba? So is that a violation of the sub judice rule?
Yeah.
We will ask this again
Later.
to Attorney Tolosa because
Yeah.
we will be speaking to him later on in the program. But there was also a lot to dissect in the hearing yesterday. Of course, the tensions between the counsels stole the spotlight, right? Stole the thunder. But going back to the cross-examination of Attorney Ferrer, I think what she was really trying to establish there was the OVP still submitted documents, reports, diba, intelligence activities. There were even the VP SPG activities where it was used, the confidential funds were used for the protection and safety of Vice President Sara Duterte. They even questioned itong si State Auditor Sailin Del Campo. Did you verify ba? Does the Commission on Audit have the power to verify if the identities of these aliases are fictitious or not? But then Sailin Del Campo maintained that that's not part of their mandate, that's not part of their duty, right? What they can do is simply compliance audit, and as far as they're concerned, the OVP did not comply with the requirements. So now, diba, as our analysts always say, the burden is on the respondent, on the defense to prove if they really have the proper documentation.
Yes. Plus, dun pa rin nila ipapasok yung joint circular na may prima facie. Diba sinasabi nila na because ito yung nangyari, you have to prove na hindi mo nga dinala ito sa hindi maayos na na pagkakagastosan. And of course, there were interjections also yesterday from almost all of the senator judges. They asked questions, and then sinabi ni Senator Win Gatchalian, kinlarify niya kung kanino mga nabigay yung mga confidential funds dun sa mga unofficial or unauthorized officials. At there's a possibility na itong buong 612.5 million may be disallowed because of what happened nga. So, we'll see what's going to happen. Pero maisigit ko lang din, Cheska, yung dun tungkol sa conduct na pinag-uusapan natin kanina, na pag-uusapan pa rin nila sa caucus nila sa Monday. And I hope sana rin ma-discuss din nila yung behaviors din ng mga senator judges.
Yes.
Now, once and for all. Because we all know naman na nakakita natin na may mga biases tayo nakakita pagdating sa interjection sa mga senator judges.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because again, the prosecution will prosecute, the defense will defend. So we already know that they will have their own sides, but the senator judges are expected to remain impartial. They took an oath of political neutrality. So we've seen for ourselves posts also that maybe.
So if presiding officer Jesus Cordero said that he can name names, diba? Mag-name ka na rin ng senator judge. Pero at some point during the interjections sa cross-examinations nung defense panel, parang hindi niya ma-articulate yung mga questions. So parang at that point si Senator Jesus Cordero na yung nagtatanong.
Well, sabi nga ni Senator Ping Lacson before, di ba? And Senator Raffy Tulfo rather, na tumingin muna sa salamin.
Bigyan nyo nga salamin.
I think this also applies here in the impeachment trial. But in other news, former Public Works Secretary Manuel Bonoan testified before the Sandigan Bayan in the malversation case against former Senator Bong Revilla. During cross-examination, Bonoan said Revilla submitted a list of priority infrastructure projects through then DPWH Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo. He said the list was for verification and possible funding under the agency's so-called leadership funds. Bonoan also testified that other senators, including Jinggoy Estrada, Bongo, and Robin Padilla, submitted project lists through Bernardo. He further said he discussed the parameters of the leadership funds with then Senate President Mig Zubiri, who allegedly decided the allocations for each senator. Zubiri, however, denied handling project lists submitted by his fellow lawmakers.
For the record, as Senate President, I never requested, held, or handled any list of project requests from senators. Wala po dumaan na proposed budget amendments sa ating tanggapan.
Right, so this is actually not the first time we're hearing about allocations, diba? Earlier this year, even last year, we already heard the term allocables, which is the portions of the DPWH budget that could be allocated for projects chosen by lawmakers. So if there's anything that Secretary Bonoan confirmed yesterday, it's that so-called leadership fund that senators get 500 million pesos at a minimum up to 1 billion pesos if you're a committee chairman. So yes, technically, yung sinabi ni Senator Mig Zubiri, there's nothing wrong with amendments, insertions. But the bigger question, I think, kasi is how are these projects chosen, di ba? And syempre, kailangan din natin tanongin, what's in it for them? Bakit nila pinipili yung mga proyekto na yan, di ba? Because if there's anything we learned also from this flood control scandal, highly systematic talaga yung scheme na ito, di ba? It goes from the proponent, the project proponent, the lawmaker, to the DPWH official, the engineers, and then the contractors. And kickbacks can go to as high as 30% for the lawmakers. So, there's still a lot to uncover when it comes to this, but medyo it's critical that Secretary Bonoan confirmed na may ganitong leadership fund.
Yeah.
Well, ang sinasabi naman nila dyan, itong leadership fund ito was created last 2024 lang. And specifically or created solely for the members of the upper chamber, which is the senators. And ang malaking question din dito kasi, bakit ang mga senador merong mga pet projects na infrastructure when their sole responsibility, as we know, by the book, by the Constitution, is to craft laws and, approve national budget. So bakit silang may mga ganon? Recommendation, di ba? Or magko-control ba sila? Yung hindi natin alam. But yun ang malaking question doon, di ba?
And this was Secretary Bonoan's first appearance on the stand. And ang dami ng pasabog. Niyang pasabog. But he was also talking about, like 24 billion pesos was allocated to senators. And then he said na the amount depends on Senator Zubiri. But he also said that all senators in the previous Congress got at least 500 million each. So sino ba yung mga nasa previous Congress na wala ngayon? Senator Sonny Angara, Nancy Binay. Who else was not? Senator Revilla, Coco Pimentel, Francis Tolentino, Cynthia Villar. And then yung nasa 20th Congress naman na wala, syempre labas sila sa usapan, hindi sila kasali. So that's Senator Bam, Senator Marcoleta, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Tito Soto, Erwin Tulfo, and Camille Villar.
Hindi, tsaka ano ba to? Lump sum ba to? Because, di ba, paano natin madidistinguish itong leadership fund na to doon sa PDAF naman na sinasabi natin, which was declared by the Supreme Court unconstitutional. Kung tulad nga nung naalala ko na interview namin the other day si Mayor Benjamin Magalong, at sinasabi nga niya doon na marami pa rin ngayon talaga yung mga budget insertions na parang pork barrel na nagagawa ng paraan para magkaroon ng kickback.
And it's important we're talking about this again because it's the budget season, right? And the executive just submitted its proposed 7.2 trillion peso budget for 2027, and 100 billion pesos there is for flood control projects. And I remember last year, di ba siniwalat din ni Senator Ping Lacson na the late Undersecretary Cathy Cabral parang naglalako ng mga proyekto through a menu. Di ba, she even asked Senator Tito Soto Osen,
Anong gusto mo dito,
oo, may
diba?
500 million ka na pagpipilian. And that was even before the National Expenditure Program was crafted. So, itong mga horse trading happens talaga even before the budget. So, we have to be very vigilant. And hopefully, may safeguards na tayo.
Exactly. Kaya nga sinasabi din ni Senator Ping Lacson na parang anong ginagawa pagdating dito sa leadership na ginagawa ng mga lawmakers, nagtitinker sila ng mga budget sa loob pa ng National Expenditure Program. Dapat hindi pa di ba?
All right, moving on. President Bongbong Marcos has described Metro Manila's garbage situation as critical. During an inspection of the Diokno pumping station in Pasay City, Marcos said massive waste buildup is clogging waterways and disrupting flood control infrastructure. He stressed that improper waste disposal must be addressed alongside dredging and other flood control measures. As a long-term solution, Marcos reiterated his push for a waste-to-energy program that would reduce the volume of garbage sent to landfills while generating electricity.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, just look at it. Does that look critical to you? It does to me. So yes, I wouldn't call it a garbage crisis, but that is the problem that we are facing. A country like Japan, they just don't throw their basura anywhere. They keep it in their pockets and throw it at home, because there's a very good system for bringing the garbage out. That is the first problem. So it's not useful to fine people for not throwing their garbage if there is no place to put their garbage.
So President Bongbong Marcos already mentioned this the other day when he was inspecting, I think, the spillway in Las Piñas yata, that the government is already looking at waste-to-energy programs. And he also mentioned yesterday naman that the technical side is done. They're just trying to put the system together, how it will work, and what the relationship is with the LGUs to the waste to the energy plant. And we'll probably see things moving along in a year and a half. That's still quite some time from now. And as we can see, the garbage problem is quite, it's literally a sea of garbage. So we also have to ask how much of it is due to the flood control scandal and how much of it is with us.
Yes. That's actually the first question I had when I saw the sea of trash. Is where did all of that come from, diba? And it's a wake-up call about our waste disposal. Kasi hindi naman yung mapupunta dyan kung maayos yung pagtapon natin ng basura, right? And we can't always just blame the government na parang kasalanan nila lahat, diba? Sometimes there has to be accountability on both sides, because every time we throw our trash, they don't simply just disappear, diba? Lalo na if you just throw them anywhere. Babalik at babalik yan. And as we've seen here in this, dun nga sa Parañaque, sa Baclaran, naipon na talaga siya. And kawawa yung mga naglinis, health hazard yan.
Actually, sikat na sikat nga tayo internationally because yung sea of trash natin, feature lahat ng mga international news agency na nililinis ng mga taga-MMDA. But it's good that you pointed out na hindi yan basta-basta nawawala because a simple, one piece of diaper, it would just decompose for what, 500 years? Yung mga plastic bags, mga 400 years yan. So talagang matagal. And doon sa communities na napupuntahan ko, ganun din sila, no, na talagang wala kasi silang proper waste disposal. So saan nila ilalagay? Doon na lang sa tabi-tabi nila, which aano rin din ng ng tubig. Tapos yan, mangyayari, magkakaroon ng flooding. But yung Solid Waste Management Act, binanggit yan ni President Bongbong Marcos nung SONA niya actually, na that he wanted to amend it because it's already 25 years old. At gusto nga niya mag-shift tayo sa yung WTF, diba? Waste to energy. Pero it will really need to be amended dahil nga may mga prohibitions dun sa incineration. So, mahaba-habang usapin yan. But yun, magtapon tayo. Nung bata tayo, di ba may campaign pa yan sa mga highways? Basura mo, ibulsa mo.
We can start with having more trash cans. Let's start with that.
Don't forget, Claygo. All right, don't go away. Morning Matters will be back after a short break.
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. President Bongbong Marcos is pushing for waste-to-energy facilities as a long-term answer to the country's garbage problem. Marcos said landfills are already full while hauling waste is becoming more expensive. According to the president, the government is now looking at possible sites for waste-to-energy plants, which would convert non-recyclable trash into electricity or other forms of energy. The Energy Department is also preparing an auction for the power that could be produced by the facilities. Marcos said the first project could begin to take shape within a year to a year and a half. Environment groups, however, have raised concerns over possible health and environmental risks from waste-to-energy technology. Day 15 of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial concluded yesterday with tensions flaring between Prosecution Counsel Attorney Lorna Capunan and Defense Counsel Attorney Christine Ferrer. And for a recap of what happened, we have mobile journalist Marymon Reyes. Marymon, go ahead.
Pauline, in yesterday's impeachment trial, Commission on Audit State Auditor Cylene May del Campo raised concerns over the handling and disbursement of Vice President Sara Duterte's confidential funds. And sinabi dito ni Del Campo, kaya pwedeng ma-disallow yung 612.5 billion pesos in confidential funds na OVP pati ng DepEd ay dahil may nakita silang direct violation ng Joint Circular 2015-01 kung saan dapat yung Special Disbursing Officer lang, or in this case sa OVP si Gina Acosta, or sa DepEd si Edward Fajarda, sila lang ang dapat na maghahawak nitong encashment ng pondo. Pero ang nangyari kasi, at sinabi rin ito ni Acosta sa isang pagdinig ng House of Representatives Committee, na pinasa itong pondo kay Colonel Raymond Lachica pagdating sa yung hepe ng VP-SPG, maging isa pang security official din ng BICE pagdating naman sa pondo ng DepEd. Another question naman on cross-examination ng defense is yung pagtatanong kung nakakatawa raw ba ang mga pangalan sa acknowledgement receipts tulad nila Mary Grace Piatos, Patiting, Andilim, Josh Bacon, yung iba pa, yung may Queso, si Miggy Mango. Ibig sabihin daw ba nito gawa-gawa lang siya or fictitious? Isa ito sa mga hinarangan ni Attorney Lorna Capunan, Counsel to the Prosecutors, kasi misleading na raw, may objection dito. Pero sinabi pa rin naman ni Del Campo, hindi ibig sabihin na nakakatawa, ay hindi na agad ito totoo. Ang problem lang kasi talaga is wala namang ginagawang investigation so far ang COA dahil walang sinasabi ang Joint Circular kung pwede or bawal gumamit ng mga alias dito sa mga resibo. Pero sa pagtatanong naman ni Senator Judge Bam Aquino na nag-inquire daw yung ilang mga abogado nila kay dating Commissioner Heidi Mendoza, sinabi daw ni Commissioner Mendoza pwede raw mag-trigger ng investigation for fraud kung sakali may nakikitang pwedeng questionable pagdating dito sa mga dokumento. At ang nasabi ni Del Campo, sa ngayon pinag-aaralan daw ng COA, and should the need be seen, magpapatawag daw sila ng investigasyon tungkol dito sa fraud. Marami ring mga objection itong si Attorney Capunan na misleading, argumentative na raw, or nag-a-assume na raw ng sagot itong si Attorney Ferrer from the defense. At nag-intervene naman si Presiding Officer Escudero at sinasabing wag daw hayaan yung generational gap seemingly na maapektuhan yung flow ng proceeding. Pinigilan daw ni Attorney Capunan yung sarili niya from spanking Attorney Ferrer and from lecturing her pagdating dito sa proceedings.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update. That was mobile journalist Marymon Reyes. Meanwhile, Sandigan Bayan resumes hearings on the malversation case against former lawmaker Zaldico. And now let's get the latest from mobile journalist Arles de los Santos. Arles, what can we expect from today's proceedings?
Pulin, inaasahan natin ngayon yung pagharap nga ng isa sa mga witnesses para sa malversation case ni dating Congressman Zaldico at mga dating opisyal ng DPWH Mimaropa kaugnay sa umano'y maanumalyang flood control project sa Nauhar Oriental Mindoro na nagkakahalaga ng 289 million pesos. Inaasahan natin po na maririnig natin kung ano nga yung mga posibleng naging irregularidad o yung sistema dito nga sa pagpapatuloy o pagkagawa ng flood control project na ito sa Nauhan Mindoro, kasi nakita natin po na recently may mga motion sila na inihahain dahilan nga para hindi agad na may presenta yung iba't ibang mga witness, pero ngayon ay haharap yung isa sa mga akusado dito sa kaso na ito na si Felizardo Sevare Casuno, kaugnay yan dito sa kasong malversation. Pero pulin itong mga nakaraan ay mayroon ding mga ibang motion na na-approve, kagaya na lamang ng pagpayag sa isa sa mga akusado sa kaso na ito na magkaroon ng medical check-up sa Philippine Heart Center dahil sa issue sa kalusugan. Ayan ay ang dating DPWH Mimaropa Construction Division Chief na si Dominic Serrano, kung saan nga inaasahan din natin na mabibigay yung partikular na araw at oras kung kailan ito papayagan na makalabas at makapunta sa ospital. Kaugnay pa rin po din dito sa kaso na ito nung nananatiling at large ang dating congressman na si Zaldico, kung saan kasama din sa at large pa yung ilang mga opisyal umano ng Amsan West Construction Incorporated na contractor umano na awardan nitong programa nila, itong proyekto na ito. No? Habang pulin, sa kaugnay pa din sa flood control scandal ng ating pamahalaan ay hindi pinayagan ng Supreme Court na maisapubliko nga yung partial report ng Blue Ribbon Committee kaugnay sa investigasyon nito sa flood control scandal. Habang sinabi naman nitong nakaraang linggo ni Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Chair Erwin Tulfo na Office of the Ombudsman na daw ang hawak ng investigasyon at maging pagpapile ng kaso kaugnay sa skandalo na ito. Huli.
Thank you very much for that report. That was mobile journalist Arles De Los Santos. Asia's unkabogable, phenomenal superstar Vice Ganda has entered into a creative partnership with MediaQuest Holdings, Inc. The collaboration will focus on developing entertainment projects that aim to offer bigger and more meaningful experiences to Filipino audiences. This also marks a new chapter in Vice Ganda's career as a, quote, queen of all networks. MediaQuest Chairman Manuel V. Pangilinan and President and Chief Executive Officer Ricky Vargas were present at the signing ceremony.
With the audience, I want to expect a pasabog projects. Same thing, di ba? Ano yung gusto nyo sa akin? Anong hinahanap nyo? You need fun, you need laughter every day to make you through to help you through the day. You need to laugh, to escape every now and then. I will give that to you with the help and support of MediaQuest.
And when we return later at 9:30 a.m., we will be speaking to Attorney Benjamin Tolosa, spokesperson of the House Prosecution Panel. Don't go away, because Money Talks with Kathy Yang is up next to get you ahead of the markets. I'm Pauline Verzosa. Stay tuned to One News.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the government is expecting collections from value-added tax and related sales tax to rise by 12.8% in 2027. The tax collections are expected to hit 860 billion pesos. Travelers can expect cheaper flights in the second half of August as the Civil Aeronautics Board brings down the fuel surcharge. And as the government submits a record 7.2 trillion peso budget for 2027, can a bigger budget overcome the economy's deeper weaknesses? We speak with former Bangko Sentral Deputy Governor Diwa Ginigundo for his views. expects value-added tax and related sales tax collections to rise by nearly 13% next year, despite weak household consumption. Collections are projected to reach more than 860 billion pesos in 2027, up from 762 billion this year. The increase would account for nearly 24% of the overall growth in tax revenues and 55% of the increase in taxes on domestic goods and services. VAT is also expected to post the fastest growth among domestic goods and services taxes. The figures cover collections from the Bureau of Internal Revenue, net of VAT refunds, but exclude VAT on imports collected by the Bureau of Customs. Meanwhile, the BIR has already breached the 2 trillion peso mark in collections as of July. That's up 5.4% from a year ago and 0.7% above its 7-month target. BIR Commissioner Charlito Martin Mendoza says the agency has already collected about 60% of its 3.39 trillion peso full-year target. That leaves 1.39 trillion pesos to be collected in the remaining 4 months. Mendoza attributed the performance to improving taxpayer compliance and sustained collection efforts by revenue offices and large taxpayer service. And airfares are set to go slightly cheaper in the second half of August after the Civil Aeronautics Board lowered fuel surcharges to level 12 from level 13. Under level 12, passengers will have to pay between 389 and 1,137 pesos for domestic flights. For international routes, the surcharge will go as high as 9,500 pesos depending on the distance. The agency adjusts the surcharge based on jet fuel price movements using the mean of Platts Singapore benchmark. The regulator shifted from a monthly to a 15-day review cycle to respond more quickly to fuel price changes following the Middle East conflict. The interim review will remain in effect until market conditions stabilize or until the CAB revises or revokes the policy. The government has submitted a record 7.2 trillion peso budget for 2027, promising better education, healthcare, infrastructure, jobs, food security, and resilience. But the question is whether a bigger budget can overcome the economy's deeper weaknesses. Our guest today says the 2.3% GDP growth was disappointing but hardly surprising. External shocks hit an economy already weakened by soft spending, falling investment, and delayed infrastructure projects. Delays, he says, were compounded by the fallout from the flood control scandal. Joining us is former Bangko Sentral Deputy Governor Diwa Ginigundo. He is currently Philippines analyst at Global Source Partners. It's good seeing you again, DG Diwa. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for inviting me again.
Yeah, you know, your assessment is blunt. The administration restored macroeconomic stability, as you say, but structural transformation lagged. So with GDP growth down to 2.3% in 2Q, has stability now begun to weaken as well?
Yes. It is true that for the most part of the last 4 years, we witnessed macro stability in terms of sustained economic growth. Inflation was broadly stable. And of course, there was something being done about fiscal sustainability. Despite the depreciation of the Philippine peso, it is something that is still consistent with the real purchasing power. In other words, in terms of the real exchange rate of the peso, it is still broadly competitive. However, in the last 2 years, this year and last year, we've seen some regression. Okay, and this is something that might continue in the next or in the last 2 years of this administration. But while macro stability seems to have been sustained, at least for the most part of the last 4 years, I think structural reforms have lagged behind. We need to see structural reforms being entrenched more decisively, particularly in terms of congressional enactment. The issue about impeachment, Kathy, should not be a reason for governance paralysis. The Constitution did not intend this constitutional mechanism like impeachment for the government to stall and to stop legislating in the case of Congress, the executive in terms of governance, and of course, in terms of the judiciary, to interpret the laws and rule on certain constitutional
Yeah,
issues.
but we'll get to that impeachment issue. But first, the link with the 2027 budget, because the budget is at 7.2 trillion pesos. That's a
right.
record, up 6%. So just relating that with the growth concerns you have, the macroeconomic stability, and how sustained that can be, do you think that a larger record budget is the right response to weak growth?
Well, the issue is not simply how big the budget is, Kathy, but how productive the additional spending will be. A 6% increase sounds substantial. It sounds big. But much of the increase is already committed to what we call, mandatory expenditure of government, like salaries, LGU allocations, and other mandatory obligations have been earmarked already in that 6% increase. What matters, therefore, is whether the remaining fiscal space goes into investments that raise productivity, economic efficiency, and the priorities of government like education, infrastructure, health, digitalization, and private sector investment.
Yeah, but what really sticks out here, DG is that flood control funding is back. 107.4 billion pesos in the 2027 proposal. And that's coming from zero funding this year amid the corruption allegations. So do you think it deserves to be back? Why should taxpayers trust its reinstatement?
Well, this year's hero budget to me is it's an overreaction to the uncovering of all of these flood control anomalies, scandals, if we will. However, the fact that there was corruption and bad governance with respect to flood control projects should not necessarily lead to zero budgeting. Flood control, it remains to be a very important social priority. No, it is necessary. Questionable flood control projects, okay, are not necessary. The government cannot simply abandon legitimate projects because of certain irregularities with respect to the use of public money. For after all, after the controversies, the standard of scrutiny should be much higher, and every project should have a clear location, engineering justification, cost-benefit analysis. We did not see them in earlier years. So it's important that we continue with the flood control project, protect our population from this climate change, and at the same time ensure that guardrails are in place. I think that's what is important, not
Okay,
the fact that
right,
we are
but
restoring it.
it is also happening ahead of an election year. How could guardrails help in that case?
Well, you have the Commission on Audit, and we hope that the Commission on Audit will do its job. That's one. Two, every department should have its own ombudsman. In other words, internal audits are in place in every government agency. And the Commission on Audit also oversees the conduct and the execution of public works projects, especially in the case of the DPWH. In other words, even if it is an election year, Kathy, those important government projects with public goods implication should not be sacrificed.
Well, I'm going to pull back in the impeachment trial because the 2027 budget sets aside nearly 11 billion pesos in confidential and intelligence funds. And this is one of the issues discussed in the ongoing trial. With the vice president's impeachment case raising fresh questions, should Congress approve them?
Well, I'm sure Congress should consider the misuse if we can call it that at this point, no, the possible misuse of confidential and even intelligence funds. I think what should what should guide Congress is the point made by one of those commission on auditors, and they said that we need to make sure that each department receiving confidential or intelligence fund are mandated to do mandates or responsibilities which would require confidential or intelligence fund. If they are not entitled to it, then they should not receive it. And Congress should enforce that kind of principle.
All right, there's so many ifs and conditionalities in what you're saying, DG Diwa. How big a risk
Well,
then
it is really,
is?
it is really a very iffy situation, Kathy.
It is, and I understand. But how big a risk then is it that there would be continued underspending because of all these concerns, a paralysis, if you will, of what we're
Yes.
going on through in 2026?
Well, it is important for the executive, especially the president, to encourage governments, government agencies, even local government units, to encourage them to spend and spend according to plans. Plans that have been submitted to Congress for funding and for LGUs to the respective councils or boards, provincial boards, and execute them. If there is nothing that should worry them, uh, there is no reason why they should execute the projects as planned, at least for the year 2026. And let it be emphasized to them that there are social benefit implications of ensuring that those social projects are executed or implemented in time. Of course, we recognize that in the second half of 2026, okay, there's very little time. We are already in the month of August. It's the rainy season, so the space for broader and more intensified spending by government and even the local government units could be quite limited. But nonetheless, efforts should be undertaken to do those investment and capital expenditures as planned.
Well, the government is calling it a people-centered budget. So what do you think people should feel by the end of next year if the claim is true? Is it higher incomes, lower food prices, better
Well,
basic
all
services?
of the above. All of the above. People-centered budget, I think I have heard that before, but the results are not consistent with that broad aspiration. What government should do is to be more serious, okay? More conscious in terms of executing all of those plans. As I pointed out, Kathy, in the past, we have a very good Philippine Development Plan, 2023 to 2028. What the government should do is really to translate this Philippine Economic Development Plan to the budget and break them down into various sectors, economic and social sectors, and then by region or by geographical location. And then if this is not consistent with the Philippine Economic Development Plan, then they should be abandoned.
Is that
They should
plan
not-
still on track, DG Diwa? I mean,
It has,
when you look at fiscal consolidation, is it genuinely still on track, or has weak growth forced the government to postpone it? Because when you take a look at the proposed budget, it assumes a deficit that's equivalent to 5.1% of GDP, and we can pull up that graph to see it very clearly, and the national government debt is projected to reach over 21 trillion pesos by the end of next year.
That's the problem with government, you know. If some deviations from the targets, they simply revise the targets and announce a new set of targets. I think the thrust is to make sure that we go back to the targets and not change the targets every year. That is one benefit or one advantage of some countries in the region, particularly Vietnam. You know, they stick to to the plan, a 1-year plan, 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year plans. And therefore, regardless of the administration that assumes the leadership of the land, there is continuity, no? There is policy consistency with the plans. Now, the problem with us is we always change the targets in midstream and then put in a new set of measures, mitigating measures or structural in nature. And in the process, we deviate from the target, and before we know it, we are way off. We are way off the target. Yes, it is true that in the budget they are looking at a big deficit, but that should not detract us from implementing the plans of government as defined by what? The fiscal sustainability plan. Yes, there are observations that the government has been quite far from the original fiscal sustainability plan. But the government should persevere and continue looking at those targets and trying to meet those targets. It's not good to simply change the targets now and then the people are already confused as to how to look at those targets, which targets to look at.
Just looking at the Philippine peso, it's opened tad lower. It's at 61.20 to the dollar, a sustained weakening here since after the second quarter GDP results. The Bangko Central's next rate meeting is on August 27th. Given the sharp slowdown in growth, do you think the BSP should raise again or pause? Or is it already too late to prevent inflation from becoming entrenched?
I think the BSP can sustain what it calls baby steps and provide another 25-point increase in the policy rate, precisely because the headline inflation continues to be elevated, higher than the 2 to 4% inflation target. That's one. Two, while it is true that it seems to be moderating in the last 3 months, the core inflation, which measures the underlying demand components of inflation, continues to gain momentum, and that should alert our monetary authorities to continue with its cautious monetary policy stance. In the case of the significant slowdown in growth, the challenge lies more on the fiscal authorities, on the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Industry. You know, the BSP should focus more on management of inflation
so
and
I
the
take it that's
sustainability
25
of the
basis points of
financial
a
sector.
hike on August 27th. That's your view. That's what you're betting
Yeah,
on.
a 25 basis point increase. Yeah.
Got that. All right, we'll leave it there, but thank you so much for your insights as always. DG Diwa Ginigundo of Global Source Partners. You're watching Money Talks. Coming right up, a global investment firm wants First Gen to be taken out of the stock exchange. And the Agriculture Department is looking to use AI-powered drones to help farmers spot problems before they get worse. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang. The Agriculture Department is looking to use AI-powered drones to help farmers spot problems before they get worse. The technology developed by a Japanese firm uses drones, aerial imaging, and artificial intelligence to monitor crops and forecast pest outbreaks, disease, and other farm hazards. The system can also help count plants, estimate production, and improve the use of farm inputs. The DA said pilot tests have already been conducted on banana farms in Davao del Norte and Davao de Oro. The agency is now studying whether the technology can also be used for sugarcane and coconut farms. The Philippines could miss out on Pax Silica if it fails to move fast enough. That is a warning from Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Babe Romualdez, who says delays could put a multi-billion-dollar investment at risk. Here's an excerpt from his sit-down interview with One News anchor Regina Lay.
The clock is ticking for the Philippines on Pax Silica, the multi-billion-dollar U.S.-led coalition that's planning a 1,620-hectare AI and tech manufacturing hub in New Clark City, Tarlac. The Philippines became the 13th country to join the coalition. In fact, it was one of the first countries to be invited, according to Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Babes Romualdez. But now Romualdez says some 40 other countries would like to sign up, and his worry is that the Philippines may lose out to them.
This thing has a timeline. I mean, if we dilly-dally or just keep arguing among ourselves, always looking at what is not good and what are the, instead of looking at the advantages, it's only natural that they'll look for somewhere else where it could be. And there are other ASEAN countries that are considered to be perhaps a second choice to the Philippines. But if we decide that that the timeline has lapsed, we definitely will lose out on this one.
One flashpoint that has already come up: fears that the deal could compromise Philippine sovereignty after reports Washington was seeking diplomatic immunity for its personnel. Romualdez insists that was never a formal demand. Despite the controversy, he says investors aren't waiting on the sidelines.
And believe me, just the mere fact that we announced that we're interested to join Pax Silica, we have companies coming to our office in Washington, the Philippine Embassy, inquiring on how they can not necessarily be part of Pax Silica, but they're interested in investing into the Philippines because it's like there's a bandwagon effect to it.
This economic push is unfolding alongside a deepening defense partnership, with Washington moving to build up the Philippines' own defense industry. Part of the plan is a controversial ammunition hub in Subic, Zambales, which will manufacture and store munitions for joint use by Filipino and American forces.
They are helping us in many ways, and there's going to be a lot on the defense industrial base that they're going to set up here. In other words, we're going to be manufacturing quite a number of the things that we will need for any potential conflict, which is a great thing.
Catch the full conversation on Long Take here on One News channel and its social media pages. Let's take a quick check on the Philippine peso and see how that's opened. It is still a tad weaker at 61.20 to the dollar. The peso rebounded by 8 centavos to close at 61.18 against the greenback. The peso closed ahead of the release of July U.S. inflation. The local unit was also supported by a softer increase in global crude prices. Traders see the peso ranging today between 60.90 and 61.30 to the dollar. Checking in on the markets overseas, U.S. markets are little changed in overnight trading as investors await for more inflation data. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq are all down by less than 0.1%. Asian markets are mostly rising in Thursday's trading. South Korea's Kospi gains 4%. Japan's Nikkei 225 rises 1.3%, and Australia's ASX 200 falls 0.25%. U.S. markets ended Wednesday's session a mixed bag as July inflation cooled to 3.4%. The Nasdaq rose 0.5%, the S&P 500 climbing 0.25%, and the Dow trading near the flat line. Benchmark PSCI was lifted yesterday by bargain hunting activities. The stock market climbed 0.6% to close at 6,366. Investors gobbled up stocks of heavyweights that reported better earnings, including SM and SM Prime. Trading remained tepid, though, with the net value turnover reaching 6.2 billion pesos. Market breadth was positive, but advancers edging out decliners 111 to 84. The broader all shares index advanced 0.75%, with the sectoral gauges all gaining ground except for services. The 10-year government bond yields ticked down to 7.3%. In corporate news, sustained consumer demand and a strong diversified business model lifted SM Investment Corp's first half net income by 8%. The parent company of the SM Group reported a consolidated net income of 42.6 billion pesos, with banking accounting for 47% of the group's earnings. SM Retail's net income rose 5% to nearly 9 billion, despite operating costs growing 12%. Portfolio investments also delivered strong performances, with Atlas Mining buoyed by higher copper prices and the To-Go Group supported by higher passenger volumes. Cebu Landmasters is preparing to launch 11 new projects worth 25 billion pesos in the second half. The projects will comprise 5,600 units across Cebu, Mactan, Ormoc, Butuan, Davao, and Panglao. First half consolidated net income slightly decreased to 2 billion pesos from 2.49 billion a year earlier. And RCBC and SSS roll out SSS Loan Lite, a digital lending service offering qualified members quick cash loans. The microloans can range from 1,000 to 20,000 pesos. SSS members can apply using RCBC's Discartec app, equipped with real-time eligibility validation, immediate loan decisioning, and instant disbursement upon approval. New developments are unfolding within companies owned by the Lopez family. A global investment firm wants FirstGen to be taken out of the stock exchange, while a local investment firm injects new equity on ABS-CBN. FirstGen's parent company, First Philippine Holdings, confirmed to the PSE yesterday global investment firm KKR has offered to acquire an additional 8.43% stake in the power company. KKR will then launch a voluntary tender offer for FirstGen's 11.67% public float. The tender offer will support FirstGen's voluntary delisting from the PSE. FPH made it clear no agreements have been signed, no formal discussions have taken place. Meantime, ABS-CBN Corp has raised 6 billion pesos in fresh equity to strengthen its balance sheet. 2.2 billion will come from the personal resources of the 3 Lopez branches. Private investment holding company INC Holdings Corp will subscribe to 3.5 billion worth of shares, alongside parent company Lopez Inc. taking 300 billion. There was little information about INC Holdings Corp. What ABS-CBN is only saying is a firm that invests in long-term company turnarounds. News of the fresh equity comes as former ABS-CBN chairman Gabby Lopez sold his stake in Lopez Inc. to San Miguel chairman Ramon Ang. ABS-CBN has been financially struggling since the House rejected its franchise renewal application in 2020. Lopez-linked stocks surge in Wednesday's trading. FirstGen climbing 28% to 27.35 per share, its highest level in 3.5 years. ABS-CBN jumped 12.6%, Lopez holding 6.8%, and FPH 4.3%. Investment coach Jun Tarobago will be watching out for 5 things, including whether Indonesian firm PT Barito pushes through with acquiring FirstGen's Energy Development Corp, and whether Ang actively involves himself in all of these negotiations. For Ron Acoba of Trading Edge, ABS-CBN can use the new equity to reduce its substantial deficit and preserve cash for its employee and debt obligations. A potential 3.5 billion rescue package from Ang could further improve the media network's financial standing. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have a great day ahead.
Good morning. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News.
Tropical storm Nangka remains outside the Philippine area of responsibility while the Habagat continues to bring rains over parts of Luzon. And with us for the latest is Pagasa weather specialist Benison Estareja. Benison, ano na ba ang latest dito kay Tropical Storm Nangka?
Good morning, Ms. Paula, again din sa ating mga taga-subaybay. As of 8 in the morning is huling namataan itong si Tropical Storm Nangka at 2,755 kilometers east-northeast of extreme northern Luzon. So patuloy pa rin po yung paglayo niya sa ating kalupaan at walang inaasahang epekto po sa mga susunod na araw. At habagat pa rin nga po ang patuloy na nagpapaulan sa malaking bahagi ng Luzon. So aasahan pa rin yung pinakamataas na tsansa ng malalakas na ulan over Zambales, Bataan, and Occidental Mindoro for today, habang may tsansa rin ng paminsan-minsang mga pag-ulan over Metro Manila, Ilocos Region, Cordillera Region, Cagayan Valley, Calabarzon, gayon din ang Mimaropa, natitirang bahagi ng Central Luzon, Camarines Norte, Aklan, Antique, and Capiz. So expect po kahit na medyo umaaraw, araw naman kung minsan, ay may aasahan pa rin po ng mga light to moderate rains, becoming heavy pagsapit po ng hapon hanggang gabi. Kaya nandyan pa rin yung chance ng mga advisories and heavy rainfall warnings natin, yung mga color-coded na yellow, orange, or red rainfall warnings. Plus, mataas din pa rin ang banta po ng mga pagbaha at pagguho ng lupa. Habang natitirang bahagi naman ng bansa, we're expecting partly cloudy to cloudy skies na may chance rin ng mga saglit na ulan at mga localized thunderstorms. Medyo mainit at maalinsangan po ang tanghali ng ating mga kababayan dito sa Visayas and Mindanao.
Benison, nabanggit mo nga, nasa labas naman ng PAR itong sinangka, pero posible bang ma-enhance pa rin niya yung habagat?
Yung enhancement po kasi it's a very technical term. Mas masasabi natin na hinihila niya yung habagat, but not necessarily na pinalalakas niya, knowing na sa ngayon, it's 2,700 kilometers, so napakalayo po niya from our landmass.
So dahil dyan, Benison, hanggang kailan ba magpapaulan sa ating bansa itong habagat?
Yung habagat, as long as meron po tayong mga weather disturbances dito sa may Pacific Ocean and Philippine Sea, mukhang magpapatuloy pa po ito. And possibly hanggang middle of next week, magpapatuloy pa rin yung mga pagulan dito sa may western section of Luzon. Even if hindi naman siya everyday sobrang nalakas po ng mga pagulan natin, but at some point talaga, everyday for Metro Manila, nearby areas, halos may mga pagulan.
Naku, Benison, dahil sunod-sunod nga yung pag-ulan, ano ba yung mga areas na masasabing prone o at risk of flooding at landslides dahil saturated na yung kanya-kanya lang mga bundok?
Kung titingnan po natin yung ating mga hazard maps, obviously itong nasa Cordillera regions, mataas po ang risk ng mga landslides. For Central Luzon, Ilocos Region, may mga incidents po at saka mga higher risk of flooding naman tayo. Gayun din dito sa Metro Manila, more on flooding po. And for Calabarzon, mixture of flash floods and landslides. Occidental Mindoro, mas marami po yung mga river flooding at saka yung landslides.
Benison, may iba pa bang weather system na binabantayan ang Pag-asa as of this moment?
Pagdating sa mga cloud clusters, marami po tayong namamataan dito sa may Pacific Ocean and Philippine Sea for possibility of becoming low-pressure areas. Nandyan pa rin po within the next 7 days. Nandun na rin po sa ating tropical cyclone potential sa ating website. So, mati-check po nila doon yung mga possible na scenarios, tapos kung saan sila patungo. But so far, wala pa namang LPA or bagyo na papasok within the next few days.
Alright, maraming salamat para sa mga update na yan. That was Pag-asa Weather Specialist, Benny Estareja.
Now, in other news, Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Marvic Leonen said the choice of whom to love and when to leave a relationship is part of a person's fundamental rights. During oral arguments on the recognition of foreign divorce, Leonen said the Constitution could be interpreted in a way that respects individuals' autonomy without requiring new legislation to recognize the right to choose when to separate. Leonen also questioned the state's role in requiring couples to remain in troubled marriages. He stressed that families can take different forms and are not limited to married couples with children. So this is a very big statement from Justice Marvic Leonen. Of course, we are still in the middle of discussing whether the lawmakers should approve or pass the divorce bill, no? So this is a welcoming statement nga from him, and of course the people from the LGBT community as well, accept this speech, this statement from Justice Leonen.
As we know nga, the options that we have here are quite limited when it comes to separation. Annulment takes very long,
And
very
it's cost so
expensive, and yun na nga, the process that people are subjected to can also be quite traumatic then. We've been hearing about the divorce bill for quite some time, and we don't really know if it's what the progress is anymore. Medyo matagal na nga siyang pinag-uusapan. So also, diba, when it comes to our brothers and sisters, or the people in the LGBTQ community also, they need legal options then to be able to be with the people that they want to be with.
Yeah. And as we know, when it comes to divorce, because the Philippines is a conservative country, right, where Catholicism is the dominant religion, there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to divorce, right? But these words from Justice Leonen, it's a big statement, right? As Angela mentioned, that choosing who to love and when to separate is a human right. Kasi hindi naman pwedeng you're just bound by the ties, the vows you said right during your marriage, especially if it's not beneficial already for both sides.
And when he stressed that families can take different forms and are not limited to married couples with children, it's also a big statement, no? Because there are a lot of families right now that it's not really textbook family, diba? Na we grew up to
Mother,
learn
father,
before, diba?
diba?
Especially, and when you mention also about LGBTQ couples, that they have the right also to decide on the welfare of their partners, and that's a good thing about Quezon City, they have that law already, diba? I forgot lang ano yung term nila doon, but a partner can actually decide on the welfare.
And they also have ceremonies na, diba? Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Beb Romualdez, warned that the Philippines could miss out on the Pax Silica deal if it fails to meet the timeline. Here's a preview of his sit-down interview with One News anchor Regina Lay.
The clock is ticking for the Philippines on Pax Silica, the multi-billion-dollar U.S.-led coalition that's planning a 1,620-hectare AI and tech manufacturing hub in New Clark City, Tarlac. The Philippines became the 13th country to join the coalition. In fact, it was one of the first countries to be invited, according to Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Babes Romualdez. But now Romualdez says some 40 other countries would like to sign up, and his worry is that the Philippines may lose out to them.
This thing has a timeline. I mean, if we dilly-dally or just keep arguing among ourselves, always looking at what is not good and what are the, instead of looking at the advantages, it's only natural that they'll look for somewhere else where it could be. And there are other ASEAN countries that are considered to be perhaps a second choice to the Philippines. But if we decide that that the timeline has lapsed, we definitely will lose out on this one.
One flashpoint that has already come up: fears that the deal could compromise Philippine sovereignty after reports Washington was seeking diplomatic immunity for its personnel. Romualdez insists that was never a formal demand.
So the idea of diplomatic immunity was just an idea thrown in.
It is an idea.
Wasn't an ask.
This is nothing new, because there are other countries that have already been able to do something similar. Of course, not quite the same as Pax Silica, but like Dubai, for instance, has an economic zone that is totally independent from the governing aspect of the
government,
country, of the government.
Despite the controversy, he says investors aren't waiting on the sidelines.
And believe me, just the mere fact that we announced that we're interested to join Pax Silica, we have companies coming to our office in Washington, the Philippine Embassy, inquiring on how they can not necessarily be part of Pax Silica, but they're interested in investing into the Philippines, because it's like there's a bandwagon effect to it.
This economic push is unfolding alongside a deepening defense partnership, with Washington moving to build up the Philippines' own defense industry. Part of the plan is a controversial ammunition hub in Subic, Zambales, which will manufacture and store munitions for joint use by Filipino and American forces.
They are helping us in many ways, and there's going to be a lot on the defense industrial base that they're going to set up here. In other words, we're going to be manufacturing quite a number of the things that we will need for any potential conflict, which is a great thing. They're going to help us. They're going to give us technology transfers, again, because of a trusted ally, that we will be able to manufacture some of these things that we need here in the Philippines.
Romualdez refused to give a timeline on this, but said things were moving quickly. Asked about the criticism that munitions hub might make Manila a staging ground for war between the U.S. and China, the ambassador insists this doesn't expose us any more to the superpower rivalry and that it will ultimately benefit the Philippines.
If we did not have a problem in the West Philippine Sea or the territorial claims, then perhaps it would be a different story altogether. But the fact of the matter is, this is where we are. It is what it is, as the saying goes. And so, whether we like it or not, we're in a situation where we have to find a way to defend ourselves. And we work closely with allies and friends. Well, an ammunition hub that will be good for us too. Again, whenever we make a deal, don't make no mistake. Secretary Teodoro, Secretary Roque of the DTI, and generally the entire government will always look at the advantages that it will have. If it's a one-sided thing, no matter how much closeness we have, we won't agree to it.
Even as the investors come knocking, Romualdez admits he often has to field questions about corruption and domestic issues. His cousin, former House Speaker Martin Romualdez, is embroiled in the country's massive flood control scandal and recently had his U.S. visas, both tourist and diplomatic, revoked.
He and I have spoken many times in the past. As an older cousin, you try to advise a person on some of the things that I feel, but all that is water under the bridge.
Were you surprised by his visa cancellation? His visas were canceled by the U.S.
The visa cancellation, I was surprised. I thought it would be coming because of the cases that could be filed against it, but I didn't expect it to happen that quickly, to be honest about it.
From the high-stakes Pax Silica to an expanding defense alliance to a family controversy that won't go away, Ambassador Romualdez says the Philippines' relationship with Washington has never been more consequential.
Stay tuned. Morning Matters returns after a quick break.
Good morning. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Senate impeachment presiding officer Cheese Escudero is moving to tighten the rules on public statements by lawyers in Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. Escudero says he has asked the clerk of court to monitor comments made by counsels outside the court after what he called repeated violations of decorum. The issue came up after defense lead counsel Sheila Sison flagged a social media post by private prosecutor Amando Virgil Ligutan. The post referred to the rule that misleading questions are not allowed during cross-examination following an earlier clash between defense lawyer Christine Ferrer and prosecutor Lorna Capunan. Escudero said a formal ruling and warning on public statements is now being prepared.
And with us this morning is Attorney Benjamin Tolosa Jr., the legal spokesperson of the House Prosecution Panel. Good morning, Attorney. So good to have you here in the studio.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Paulina, Cheska, and Angela. Thank you for having me here today.
First of all, Attorney, how have you been 6 weeks
Yeah.
into the trial?
Well, it's been quite tiring. I won't deny that, but we're hanging in there.
Nakatulog pa naman?
Not as much as I'd want to.
Okay, well, Attorney, yesterday was a very interesting day for the impeachment trial. And I think this is the first time that we saw tensions really flare between both sides on the floor. For my first question, meron po ba talagang generational divide between lawyers?
No, hindi naman siguro. No, it's not really that. But yung nakita nga at some point medyo spirited exchange, I would call it. It's really normal. That's not unusual. Dahil yung nature talaga ng proceedings, it's really adversarial. Of course, we're espousing different views, different positions. So normal talaga minsan. No? Hindi naman inita, no? But medyo more of, as I've said, spirited discussions. But that's nothing really out of the ordinary. Yeah.
But I'm interested to know what happened after. I mean, when the cameras were off already yesterday, may nag-approach ba sa isa't isa? What happened? Give us the BTS.
No, I don't think so. I mean, honestly, I don't think there was that maybe a meeting between Attorney Ligutan and the other side. I don't think so. Yeah.
Well,
but
parang okay, casual.
yeah, but well, it's more of me and Attorney Po just talking about what was said by the presiding officer, but with respect to the other counsels, Attorney Capunan, I don't think they had the chance. But usually naman, no, you see it, they're very cordial before and after meetings, hearings, so they talk to each other.
Because we've, even Congressman Terry Redon mentioned yesterday, na when it came to Attorney Michael Poa, hindi naman ganun yung exchanges. So, I mean, what kind of relationship do we have between Attorney Capunan and Attorney Ferrer?
Yeah. What I would say is maybe siguro iba-ibang...
Merits of the case.
Hindi naman,
you're
I
free
know.
to
Yes, that's correct. So, siguro iba-ibang style, no? See, for example, Attorney Poa, medyo mas calm, no? And you see, more respectful, and siguro, I would say, I'm not sure if this is the correct description given by Attorney Poa himself, no, to characterize it. Parang, I'm not sure if he used the word feisty, something to that effect. But again, kanya-kanya ng mga style yan in court, no, among litigators. So.
Well, there was also that social media post of Attorney Ligutan, to which the defense took an exception, right? Attorney Sheila Sison even made that manifestation saying that it was done in bad faith. But sinabi naman ni Attorney Ligutan, there was no malice there, wala nga siyang pinangalan, diba? But do you think Attorney Ligutan should apologize for that post?
Well, I'm sure he'll explain his post on Monday when he's given the opportunity to do so. But I would say first, as lead counsel, I would understand where Attorney Sison's coming from. Maybe she felt the need to speak up for her co-counsel. No? But at the same time, I also don't see any intention to disrespect anyone on the part of Attorney Ligutan. Una-una, I don't think anyone could say that he said anything that is that wasn't true, or accurate in his statement. That was just a basic evidentiary rule. Na misleading questions are not allowed either in direct or cross-examination. Well, professor din kasi yan. Siguro, alam niya, madaming mga sumusubaybay, law students, new lawyers. So siguro he just wanted to make sure everyone's informed and guided accordingly. But yun nga, then today wala namang intention. And definitely, it does not touch on the merits. No? Wala namang pinag-uusapan na factual issues, na he weighed in on it, nagbigay siyang comments again. It's just an elementary evidentiary rule na he just clarified.
Well, the people noticed that the defense felt insulted by some of the media pronouncements of course, or Facebook posts no, ng prosecution panel. But others are quick to point out na bakit hindi rin ba pagalitan ng impeachment court ang defense because Vice President Sara Duterte directly attacked the court and its jurisdiction. Is this something you want to bring up as well?
Well, with that, on that point, we really agree. No? If dahil nga kahapon, no, the defense or pointing out that perhaps Attorney Ligutad committed the violation of the sub judice rule. But tama kayo, no? Kung if there's someone who may have committed the sub judice rule, mukhang wala na sigurong mas lumapit sa violation na yan other than the Vice President herself. You'll recall in her statement on July 14, she attacked the prosecution by accusing us of resorting to fabricated evidence, no, manufactured narratives. So obviously, that goes into the merits. No? Sasabihin na nag-iimbento kami ng ebidensya. And after that, we'll see a progression on her attacks. After attacking the prosecution, last week, she attacked the impeachment proceedings itself by saying it has been marred by bending the law. So clearly, ang attack dyan, it's against the integrity of the impeachment court and even the presiding officer. No, because he's responsible for the conduct of the hearing. At kung sasabihin mong may bending the law, ibig sabihin, you're claiming madaming irregularities or acts that are against the law that are being done and being tolerated by the presiding officer. So I'm sure, no, and when the spokesperson of the impeachment court was asked about it, if those acts of the Vice President constitute violation of the sub judice rule or even contemptuous conduct, no, ang naging tugon niya, if I remember correctly, is the presiding officer has been liberal in the application of this rule. So of course, we trust, no, in the fairness of the presiding officer, and we're sure that yung liberality yan, no, if it's applied in favor of the Vice President, it will also be accorded to the other persons covered by the sub judice rule, including the councils, of course.
Well, the presiding officer has also repeatedly suggested that there should be a spokesperson that's not part of the council. That would be you. But why is there a need for a spokesperson who's not part of the litigation team? And is there anything in the rules of court that prohibits a lawyer litigant from speaking to the media?
Wala naman. There's no blanket prohibition. In fact, the prohibition is the sub judice rule, and which prevents counsels and parties from talking to the media about or giving them comments and disclosures about merits of the case. But this has a recognized exemption, the true and fair reporting rules. So ibig sabihin yan, if you're just relaying to the public matters that have already been discussed in court, tulad ng mga testimonies of witnesses, or arguments in the submissions of the parties, since magiging of record naman yan, available to the public, then this will not be considered as a violation of that rule. So again, walang blanket prohibition. You can just be guided by that rule. Just don't violate in sub judice rule. But of course, we will respect the decision that the presiding officer may make on this matter. But we've always tried to be careful in giving statements, answering media questions. But with this reminder, we'll ensure that we'll even be more mindful and careful going forward.
All right, so Attorney, now let's go to the meat of yesterday's hearing. During the cross-examination, the defense was trying to establish a lot of points, right, and arguments. But from the prosecution's perspective, what was the most important takeaway from the testimony of Sailin Del Campo?
Okay. Well, first, there were a lot, but if I'll try to choose a few of those. Remember, on cross, he was asked about some particular activities attended by the Vice President, no, to try to point out that these are the activities that caused them to use these confidential funds. But also pointed out, this was actually done by the Vice Presidential Security Group. And when the witness was asked about it, are this kind of expenses allowed, sabi niya, those are actually one of the prohibitions, no, yung salaries of normal employees. Dahil sabi nga, she already has more than 400, no, at that time, security personnel. So if these are routinary security work done by her security personnel, then confidential funds should not be used to pay their salaries as prohibited under the joint circular. I think another important clarification that she was able to make is how come, no? Because she said, because of the admissions under oath given by the special disbursement officers, of the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education, that the Vice President herself instructed these two SDOs to hand over the confidential funds to third parties, no? Because that's a direct violation of the joint circular, as stated by the witness. No? Sabi niya, that caused the COA to issue a notice of disallowance. No? So, she was asked about it. How come that happened with respect to the Office of the Vice President and not with the Department of Education? Because Department of Education, nakakuha sila ng credit notice. Explanation niya, well, a credit notice has been issued before that hearing happened. So may credit notice na. But when she was asked, sabi naman niya, it's actually still under consideration. The Commission is studying, in light of this new information, if they should reopen the audit. No?
Well, I was gonna ask you nga that, attorney, yung gaano ka-importante or how significant is the statement of COA Auditor Shailene Del Campo in terms of saying na the reason why they issued the notice of disallowance because of the admission of SDO Gina Acosta in the House Justice Committee pa noon at that time, diba, na they actually gave the confidential funds to unauthorized personnel.
Yeah.
But the defense argued that hindi naman daw expressly said in that joint circular na dapat kapag hindi binigay sa authorized person ay automatic na siya, notice of disallowance kaagad ang gagawin.
Yeah. Well, again, to be careful, no, in responding to this, I will have to cite, the testimony of the witness regarding this matter. Sabi niya, they found it to be an clear irregularity because it was a direct violation, of the prohibition under the joint circular. She cited specific provisions of that circular saying the SDO cannot transfer funds to another person. No? So, and she explained the reason for this. Yung SDO kasi, that's a bonded officer. So, meaning, parang may security, sa government because she's handling this funds. So, pag pinasa niya sa tao who is not similarly bonded, then you don't have that security. Plus, when you, if the head of agency designates a person as SDO, kailangan yan merong specific authorizations issued in favor of that person. No? Tapos yung SDO, siya din nagsasign ng certification, nakasama ng mga liquidation report submitted to the COA. So, yung accountability, mas magiging mahirap kapag napunta siya sa someone who's not an SDO. That's the reason behind that. So, because they found it to be serious enough, itong violation na to, they issued notice of disallowance because of it.
Well, the defense also used the OVP's protective intelligence reports as an argument that crime prevention is a legitimate purpose for confidential operations aside from making arrests. And lumabas yung word na intelligence. So there's intelligence funds and confidential funds. There, there might be a blurred distinction. Could you clarify the difference between intelligence funds versus confidential funds? Is there a distinction as to the purpose and treatment under audit rules?
Yeah. So, That's a good point, no? Because nga dun sa on-cross, she was being asked about these activities and to use their own words, sinasabi, intelligence activities to, in which Attorney Kapunan pointed out, well, these are not even covered. We're talking about confidential funds. No? And they're treated differently kasi yung confidential funds, these are given to civilian government agencies. No? And for yung naman intelligence funds, ito naman yung talagang mandate nila. They conduct intelligence operations, no, tulad ng AFP, for example. No?
Yeah.
So, yan yung difference nun. And when the way that you liquidate it, meron ding difference yan. I will cite what the witness stated, no, nung she was asked about yung placing some records in a vault and all that. Ang explanation niya, and again, I'm just quoting her, sabi niya, that just applies to intelligence funds.
Well, Attorney, another point the defense was trying to drive at yesterday was whether whether funny names, laughable names would automatically mean that the recipients are fictitious. Now, Sailin Del Campo said that it is not part of her job to verify the identities. She's only concerned about the compliance audit, right? So, anong point po ng mga, what's the point of the prosecution for bringing up these names, right? Miggy Mango, Pia Piato Slim, Ralph Joseph Bacon.
Yeah. So, tama yung sinabi niya. In their audit that they conducted, that's just a compliance audit. So, hindi na nila tinignan yun if these are fictitious because nga yung funny names are unusual names. No? Mas more of ang naging issue naman kasi dyan, not just that the names are familiar or funny, but more of there are other irregularities there. Like, for example, the dates. No, yung date niya, for example, it should be an expense for 2022 but the date's 2023. Madami ding issue dyan nakalagay. For example, si Mary Grace Piatos, she received supposedly 70,000 worth of medicines. But as they pointed out, kung medicines yan, where's the proof that you actually bought medicines? But they never submitted official receipts. No? Dun sa mga iba naman, more recently, yung same day, parang across the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, different persons, supposedly they received the funds, which is, as noted by the presiding officer, physically impossible. But, so dun sa audit nila, hindi naman tayo limited dyan dito sa impeachment proceedings. No? So, ibang audit yung ginawa nila doon or ibang appreciation, no, of the liquidation documents. Iba naman dito. Dito, we're still highlighting them because the impeachment court can consider all of this, no, as a whole, all of this official, all of the liquidation reports that submitted, then kasama din yan, no, titignan nila, mukha bang totoo to in reaching that conclusion, no, if it seems that they really use these public funds for the purposes that they stated, or mukha bang manufactured dito, diba? That's a determination that they will make, and I'm sure kasama yun sa consider nila, no, para bang pinagkatuwaan na lang using these names, no? But again, I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying we're highlighting it for the impeachment court to consider.
We have a lot of questions to raise, but unfortunately, we don't have much time. But I want to ask you na lang, at this point in the trial, are you confident? Does the prosecution is the prosecution confident also that you guys have already established, no, this Article 1 misuse of alleged confidential funds? Para mas maintindihan ng mga tao na confident ba ang prosecution na nailatag namin talaga yung mga ebidensya at talagang merong misuse na nangyari dito?
Okay, what I would say is, again, the determination of what we've presented is already enough to prove our charges in the articles of impeachment. Of course, that falls under the exclusive jurisdiction of the court. But what we can say is we think our targets, no, have been met, no, when we presented these witnesses, no. So naging maliwanag na para sa amin, no, ang mga first witnesses, yung mga bank managers, they already explained that this tong bulto-bultong cash, no, na ibinigay, no, at which they said which was unusual to the SDOs. And then pumunta naman tayo now dun sa mga representatives of COA who themselves audited, no, yung liquidation of this use. So they explained to us what are the rules that should be followed in using and liquidating them, and they also explained to us their observations, no, the discrepancies and irregularities that they saw. But we're not yet done, no. So we will also and next week, be presenting the SDOs themselves as hostile witnesses. No? Dahil nga, sila nakatanggap supposedly ng pera, I mean, so they'll be able to give us a good information about where they actually used these amounts for, di ba? Saan nila yan binigay? Let's see their testimony. And after those, as stated in the pre-trial order, meron pa tayong ibang pre-present dyan. For example, testimonies from a representative of PSA, meron din tayong na-name na from law enforcement agencies. No? So, but what we can say is pipilitin namin itong to shorten. We asked for 30 trial days for this, but similar to what we did with the grave threats, no, now we shortened our list of witnesses. We'll do our best to do that para nga hindi na tayo tumawid next year pa.
All right, and on that note, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully you get some sleep this weekend. That was Attorney Benjamin Tolosa Jr., spokesperson of the House Prosecution Panel.
Thank you so much.
Now, don't go away. We still have more matters to discuss after this quick break. Keep it here on One News.
Good morning. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. The Department of Education said 3,924 classrooms in 722 schools were damaged by the combined effects of Tropical Cyclone Maymay and the southwest monsoon. Of the total, 751 classrooms were destroyed, 818 were severely damaged, and 2,355 sustained minor damage. The weather disturbances also affected more than 6.5 million learners and 288,000 personnel across 10,029 public schools in 8 regions. Meanwhile, 20 classrooms in La Trinidad Benguet were affected by landslides.
Now, to discuss the impact of the weather disturbances on schools and learners, we're joined by the Philippine Business for Education Executive Director, Hannibal Kamwa. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you again.
Hi, good morning, Ma'am Angela. Good morning. It's nice to be back. Thank you for inviting me to the program.
All right, the recent class suspensions from the string of typhoons and monsoon rains have affected over 6 million students, according to DepEd. But what is the biggest concern now for schools and especially learners now that nearly 4,000 classrooms have been affected by the recent weather disturbances?
Now, again, when we talk of, let's say, class suspensions due to the recent weather disturbances, kailangan nating una talaga dyan ay yung safety ng mga bata. No? So, suspending face-to-face classes, and basically, ang guiding principle dyan is to make sure that the learners are actually safe. Now, in terms of damages to, let's say, schools, um, we know parang alam na to natin, matagal na, that every time because again, sa topografiya at sa climate ng ating bansa, alam natin that during the rainy season we experience this weather disturbances, and may mga classrooms or may mga schools tayo na naapektuhan. Ang magandang tingnan, and actually medyo nakakabahala ng numero doon, especially just on the classroom, no, because we are catching up, no. There's a conscious effort from the Department of Education and basically the whole of government to catch up with the classroom deficit, kasi sobrang laki ng backlog natin on the classrooms, right? But there's data actually that, and this came from EDCOM as well, that may mga taon na mas marami pa tayong nasisirang mga classrooms kaysa nagagawang classroom. So that's actually very troubling, because naghahabol tayo ng numbers in terms of construction of new classrooms, but then on a year-by-year basis, there are a lot of classrooms being destroyed by these weather disturbances, but also there are a lot of classrooms also that because of sa kalumaan at sa edad na talaga ng classrooms ay kailangang i-abandon na. So this actually compounds, that's what I've said, the problem, the underlying problems that we experience now, which leads to the learning crisis, as we always say in Tibet.
Well, sir, you already mentioned this. Every year there is a weather disturbance that affects the classrooms, that affects schools. Just last year, we had Super Typhoon Uwan, Typhoon Tino. They damaged schools, classrooms as well, disrupted learning. But have there been lessons learned from then, even just from then or in the previous years, that you've seen have been implemented already?
Of course. We give credit where credit is due. No? We've learned, I think, particularly our education agencies have learned into really make sure that there is still as much as possible learning continuity even with this weather disturbances. So let's say, for example, and I think we need to go back to lessons learned even from the pandemic, on learning continuity during the pandemic, and I think we carried that over, no, na natutunan natin yun and then take the practices that was done during the pandemic, na carry over yan ng ating Department of Education, particularly in terms of making sure that even though there are class suspensions, natututo pa rin yung mga bata. There's still, as much as possible, learning continuity. But again, meron yan pong pagbabalanse in terms of what I've said earlier about safety of our learners. So as mentioned, and I think these are embodied in the circulars as issued by DepEd, may mga certain levels sila, no? May mga certain levels na ino-observe for learning continuity during this periods of let's say class suspensions due to weather disturbances. So let's say, for example, magsi-shift sila on modular learning, or let's say for those who can and merong mga access to internet, or let's say digital learning, they can shift to let's say asynchronous tasks. So I think we have carried over those practices na natutunan natin in order to adapt to these kinds of circumstances. But I would like also to highlight that meron pa ding mga issues, particularly for those that, for example, for learning continuity measures that would need, let's say, access to digital platforms, or let's say kahit yung mismong hardware, access to a tablet or a computer, because again, sa bansa natin, napakalaki ng digital divide. So may mga estudyante talaga na wala talaga silang access to digital resources, more so both the hardware and also the software for that, even the internet connection wala. So napapag-iwanan sila no, kung yung measure for learning continuity is based internet-based or digital-based. So we need to address that particularly.
Well, speaking of that, Sir, how big of a problem is access dito nga sa alternative learning, sa technology, and how can we address that gap?
No, again, it's a good point. No, in terms of, let's say, alternative learning and also other modes or modality of so to ensure that there's learning continuity. As what I've said earlier, may mga nagagawa, as what we've said, and pero may mga issues. No, so how do we address the gaps? Is actually to make sure that access is number one. No? So while there is that conscious effort to really provide for, let's say, internet connectivity or let's say digital device to the students, let's say, to the learners, the reality is the correspondence to that or the ratio to that is not really 1:1. No? So there are other modalities, is what you said, na merong mga printed modules, in this case that they can do, or let's say offline activities or tasks, no, that they can actually do. So I think a low-hanging fruit to this would be, alam naman po natin that it is during these months na nagkakaroon talaga ng severe weather disturbances. So I think there should be, let's say, more strategic planning in terms of prepositioning the learning materials. Itong mga printed na modules na to, kailangan naka-preposition na so that hindi siya i-distribute by the time na may weather disturbance na. So basically, prepositioned na siya, especially areas that would experience most of these class suspensions due to weather disturbances. Kasi, as what we've said, and I've already stressed on this before, nakakabahala kasi yung number of school days lost. No? Number of school days lost because of let's say, weather disturbances. In recent na EDCOM data dyan, merong eskwelahan actually sa Cordillera Administrative Region that they almost lost 40% of contact time because of weather-related na class suspensions. So almost 40%. That's very significant contact time or class days lost to this weather disturbances. So learning from that, there should be, let's say, strategic planning na kailangan naka-preposition na yung mga learning materials, naka-ensure na even with this learning, with this weather disturbances, dapat ang learning continuity ng mga learners natin ay napoprotektahan as much as possible.
Yun nga po talagang pinaka-problema din talaga ngayon yung aside from quality of education is also the equity of education. Because as you said earlier, yung there's digital gap because there are schools and there are students who do not have access sa mga computers, internet signals, and let's face it, we have to admit it also na there are schools pa rin that don't have electricity at this point. So ano yung pwedeng magawa doon in that issue? And of course, how will this three-term, yung new three-term natin sa school, makatulong sa mga estudyante from weeks of class suspension?
Maganda na you brought up, Ma'am Angela, the point on equity, which we discussed earlier. Kasi dapat maintindihan din natin na yung class suspensions, hindi yan experienced equally by each learner. Hindi yan uniform among the learners. Sabi nga natin, for those who have, let's say, access to resources, digital device and internet connection, they can cope up easily as compared, let's say, to a learner na wala ng digital device, and then but at the same time residing in a flooded barangay, no? So tapos wala pang digital device, or in this case access to even just a printed module is also in question. So talagang every suspension, because as what we've said, it's not an equal experience to all our learners, it widens the gap, no? So and that's how learning poverty compounds. That's how the education crisis compounds, no? Kapag again, we're playing the catch-up game, pero talagang may naiiwan because nga of these challenges that are compounding. Particularly for this previous week, is because of the weather disturbances. Now, as what I've said, ano yung mga kailangan natin? I think the policy is there. The policy is sound. Like for example, meron ng our local governments have been empowered to let's say issue more localized na mga class suspensions. So nakikita natin just particularly for today, may mga areas in Metro Manila na nag-suspend pero meron ding mga areas na wala. So that's actually a big improvement from before na talagang merong blanket suspension na minsan, parang di naman umuulan, bakit may suspension on this part of, let's say, Metro Manila or in this region. Now, our local government units are actually empowered to, let's say, make localized suspensions such that, again, kung hindi naman talaga ganon kalala yung sitwasyon, and then based on forecast, hindi ganon kalala yung magiging pag-ulan or pagbaha, ay merong pasok for those parts, let's say, example, for
Right.
those regions or those locations. So, again, napoprotektahan doon yung learning continuity. Now, with the revised school calendar, as we've discussed this before in this program, and I think, as what we've said, maganda po yun na napoprotektahan yung learning time, no? And then, nandoon yung learning blocks na nakikita natin. Pero now, this is actually the real test of it because they implemented it this school year. The implementation of this revised school calendar is actually ngayong school year na to. So that's where the rubber meets the road, no? So kailangan na makikita natin na in the implementation, napoprotektahan ba talaga yung learning block na yon, yung learning time na yon, at ano yung gagawin, no? Based on the policy, ano yung gagawin kapag merong class suspensions and in this case may mga learning hours na lost or learning days lost because of this class suspension. So paano yan i-cope up ng mga learners natin? Meron ba yung let's say makeup classes or would there be mediations for those? But again, we also need to take note na kapag nagkakaroon ng makeup classes, ang nagiging issue dyan is hindi rin lahat nakakapag-attend ng makeup class, especially for those, let's say, makeup classes na ginagawa on extended hours, after school hours, or during Saturdays. Hindi lahat ay nakakapag-attend yan. Particularly because, let's say, for example, of, again, individual circumstances na i-experience ng ating mga learners.
Sir, if I may go back to one of your points earlier na sinabi mo, naghahabol tayo. How do we catch up when every year, as you said, there are schools that sustain major damage?
Now, in terms of infrastructure, I think naghahabol tayo particularly because there are now more, let's say, modalities for classroom construction. And again, we give credit to this administration, particularly na hindi lang nakaatang sa DPWH yung pag-construct ng mga bagong classrooms. Now, it has been decentralized. Number one, pwede na makipag-partner ang DepEd sa mga local government units mismo para ang local government yung mag-construct ng classrooms. So, that's one modality. Another modality is yung public-private partnerships. So DepEd has come up with, let's say, packages for PPPs for classrooms. So kung saan pwedeng makapag-participate yung mga private companies and private sector para makatulong sa pagpuno ng classroom gap, no? Para mapunan, yung classroom gap. Maliban po dyan, there's also steps, particularly to rent out, let's say, certain buildings na suitable, no? Existing building na siya, tapos suitable siya na para i-convert into classrooms. So mas mabilis po yun. So I think steps are being made, concrete steps are being made, and there's real progress in terms of catching up on the classroom deficit or on the classroom gap. But because the problem is just so massive, kung titingnan natin, the running figure for this was around 160,000 classrooms ang kailangan nating i-construct to meet the classroom gap alone. So, but then, every year kasi, as what we've experienced now, every year, merong mga nasisira, merong mga naaabandona. So, kailangan, and that adds up to that 160,000 na number. So, while we are catching up and may mga bagong modalities para mas mabilis tayo makapag-catch up, we need to take into consideration na every year, nagkakaroon ng bagong, let's say, damages, and at the same time, nag-i-increase yung student population, so or learner population kasi nagkakaroon ka ng bagong intake ng mga bagong learners. So, pero while you address the current gap, kailangan isaalang-alang din na yung gap na yan may tendency na lumaki on a yearly basis. So, more than the current, let's say, modalities for and steps being made, dapat, I think, the government is in the right direction, but kailangan mas paigtingin pa yung itong mga alternative modes or modalities para mapunan yung classroom gap. Let's involve more stakeholders, private sector, local government units, and more public-private partnerships para mapunan po itong problema natin sa mga classrooms na nagko-compound in a yearly basis.
Sir, what about schools, classrooms being used as evacuation centers? Just recently, 134 schools were used in the aftermath of the Habagat. Should that be changed already? Because this obviously also leads to class disruptions because schools have to accommodate all these affected families.
Yes, actually, may batas dyan. Just in terms of, let's say, the use of schools as evacuation centers, may matagal ng batas dyan. And it was actually learning from Typhoon Yolanda way back. So there's Republic Act 10821 or the Children's Emergency Relief Protection Act. And in that law, and its IRR, it actually specifies na kailangan limitahan ang paggamit ng eskwelahan bilang evacuation center. Pero ang nagiging problema is because while the law mandates that there should be, let's say, construction of evacuation centers in local government units that frequently experience this flooding or, let's say, weather disturbances or disaster-prone areas, ang katotohanan po ay may mga limitations po talaga ang mga local government units na hindi po sila makapagtayo agad-agad ng mga evacuation centers that are separate from the school. So, pero in terms of implementing guidelines, ang alam po natin ay dapat last resort po yung paggamit ng eskwelahan. So if there are other facilities na pwedeng gamitin as evacuation center, let's say for example, covered courts, suitable to become evacuation centers. So yan, mga gyms, mga covered courts, even mga assembly halls or barangay halls na pwedeng gamitin. So kailangan last resort po yung eskwelahan because again, we are still emphasizing on learning continuity. So kapag ginamit kasi ang eskwelahan bilang evacuation center, maliban sa mababawasan yung classrooms na operational na pwedeng magamit for learning delivery, nagkakaroon din po, let's say, ng disturbance yan sa mismong pag-conduct ng klase. Kasi yung mga bata, hindi yan sila sanay na may mga ibang tao sa loob ng eskwelahan. Kapag may mga evacuees, medyo naiilang, I would say, maiilang ang ating mga learners na habang nag-aaral sila ay may mga evacuees within the school vicinity. So as what I've said, dapat last resort po yung paggamit ng eskwelahan bilang evacuation center.
All right, and on that note, we're going to leave that there for now. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. As always, that was PBED Executive Director Hannibal Camwa.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if they're going to use the classroom, it should be 15 days only. Yun ang sabi sa batas doon. But alright, that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. I'm Angela Lagusad Castro.
We hope we've given you just the right start to your morning. I'm Cheska Litoncano.
Let's make the day matter. I'm Pauline Berzosa, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Kapatid, we are One News.
Your side,
all the time.